What is this?
Oh, do that now.
Semon, Musical Oy Baruch Atu Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Oy Hamavdi lebeinko yedesh lecho. Ay beino bornecho v'voishem. Ay ben Yisrael v'helo avamim. Elai lai lai elai lai lai elai lai lai. Didi lai 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 la 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 la. Dida da dida da dida do. Dida la 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 lo. Didi la 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 la. Didi la 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 la. Didi da da da, didi da da, didi da da. Ay ben yo, oy mashvi, Yishem v'vaishes, yemei hamavaseh. Didi la 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 la. La 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 la. Didi la 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 la. Didi la 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 la. Didi la la. Didi la la la. Da 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 da. Oy Baruch Atoy Adonai Hamavdil Beineko Yedesh Lecho.
Amen.
La 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 Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Ibim Meirav Yameinu, Hayavava Yeleveinu, Hayim Mashiach ben David, Hayim Mashiach ben David Lishoimi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Ibim Meirav Yameinu, Hayavava Yeleveinu, Hayim Mashiach ben David, Hayim Mashiach ben David. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Agiladi. Hayim Hera Vayava Yeleinu, Hayim Mashiach ben David, Hayim Hera Vayava Yeleinu, Hayim Mashiach ben David. Thank you. you all so much for joining. Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful, happy, and healthy week, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Sholom, so much. It's beautiful, very enjoyable. It is now my pleasure to introduce my father, Rabbi Rapoport.
Sorry, I'd like to thank Lori Kornblum and Bruce Seaman very much for sponsoring this virtual Shabbaton in honor of Lori's upcoming birthday. May you have many more happy and healthy birthdays. Talking about birthday, today happens to be my birthday. And when on a birthday, the Almighty gives a person who's celebrating the birthday on the very day of the birthday the power to give blessings that are much more powerful than an ordinary regular blessing. So I'd like to bless all of you that you should all be healthy and well and safe and go through the COVID-19 without any complications or difficulties. And you should have a lot of nachas from your children and grandchildren. And we should all grow in Torah and mitzvahs. And we should increase our commitment to the Almighty. And thereby we should speed up the coming of Mashiach, that he should come and take us out of exile very, very soon.
Amen.
Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Lazer Gurkov, Rabbi Lazer Gurkov. Lazer Gurkov is a thinker and teacher that audiences relate to. In his easy, informal manner, Lazer engages his listeners and leads them on provocative journeys of thought. A sought-after lecturer, his talks combine hands-on mentorship with empowering self-help techniques. He is gifted with the ability to present a complicated and easily understood language and has successfully lectured to audiences across Israel, Australia, Europe, and North America. Lazer has authored Portraits of Leadership. It's a curriculum on leadership for the Roar Jewish Learning Institute, that's the JLI, that was taught to 50,000 students in 6 continents. A prolific author, he has published more than 900 essays in print and online publications. He is a member of JLI's curriculum team, a columnist for Chabad.org and Israel National News and Blogs at Jerusalem Post and Times of Israel. He is the author of 2 books, Reaching for God, the Jewish Book of Self-Help, and recently published Mission Possible, Living with Higher Purpose. He currently serves as the rabbi of Congregation Beth Tefillah in London, Ontario, and he just happens to be my cousin. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rabbi Lazer Gurkov.
Shavua Tov, everyone. A good vach. It's such a pleasure to be with you, to be with my cousins, and to be with your entire community. I want to tell you something that you already know. You know how special the rabbis are in your community. But what you may or may not know is how much they stand out from all of the other rabbis around the world, including all the Chabad rabbis. Now, I'm biased, of course, they are my cousins. But the heart, the integrity, the incredible charisma, the persona that your rabbis bring to your community is something special. And I hope that you all appreciate it and appreciate them because they give you their all. So when I was asked if I would share some thoughts this evening, I was thrilled to have the opportunity to be part of such a wonderful community and the team of rabbis and rebbitzins that come together to give you so much. So thank you so much. I'm humbled and honored at the same time to be here. And I'm going to talk today about finding an anchor in a world of shifting values. And the subtitle is Finding the God in Good. I don't know how many of you have stopped to think about it, but the way we spell God in English is really found in the word good. But the question is, when good things happen, do we see God in it? And when God acts do we see it as good? Because in a world of shifting values, sometimes it doesn't feel so good. So I'll be upfront and I'll tell you that the talk I'm about to give is really the first 2 or 3 chapters, or at least a digest of the Mission Possible book that Rabbi Rapoport mentioned earlier that I had written. So if you'd like to get more information, you can find Mission Possible online. You can find it at Amazon and other online book retailers. And you can feel free to explore it in more detail. Today, I'd like to address the fact that we live in a society, we live in a culture that teaches us to succeed. It trains us to succeed and it positions us for success. And success is the barometer of achievement. What is a successful person? Someone who has built a career, someone who has established a medical practice or a law practice, can provide for their family, is an integral member of their community, somehow also gives back in one way or another, and has done well. So we have to ask ourselves, in terms of this type of value system, what is its purpose? What is it for? And no one needs to look much further than the last 10 months to realize that unless we find our principle and our value and we can ground ourselves in that purpose, we can very quickly lose any regard for what we used to value so much. If it was our career, if it was our social standing, so much has changed in the last few months that has shaken us up and has shaken up the way we live and the way we pursue life, that it helped us realize that some of those golden cows that we were worshiping up until now may not actually be the purpose for which we should be living. So let me try and present it to you this way. If you are a parent or you were a parent of young children at one point, or if you never were, then you were a child at one point who had a parent, then you're probably familiar with this early morning scene. And I don't know if in your communities the schools are open. In our community where we live in Canada and London, Ontario, the schools have been closed for a few weeks. They're opening on Monday. But be that as it may, if your schools are open, or if not, then it's a scenario familiar to you from last year, that at some point in the morning, you woke your children up. Let's say you have 2 children, a son and a daughter. You got up 2 hours earlier, you got everything ready. Breakfast is on the table, their clothes are laying out, you're already prepared, you've eaten, you're well groomed, you're ready to go to work. All you now need to do is wake up your children. And you wake them up, you smile at their tired faces, you help them out of bed, their clothes have been laid out so they can get dressed. And suddenly, of course, your daughter throws a tantrum. No, she will not under any circumstances wear that shirt, right? Meanwhile, your son, who is already dressed, is outside and playing basketball before breakfast, and you have to run outside to remind him to actually tie up his laces, let alone come back in for breakfast. You finally get everyone settled, they've eaten, they now have their backpacks on, and you're bending down to tie up your son's laces while you're looking for your daughter's homework. You get everybody into the car when you remember to wipe the stain off of your daughter's cheeks. You get in the car and you find your way to school on time. Phew, what an achievement. Now from there, you have a few hours of calm, you go to work and you ask yourself, how am I going to spend the rest of this day? Only in the back of your mind, there's a really sad thought. I know exactly how I'm going to spend the rest of this day. I'm going to do as much as I can until 3:15 or 3:30. Then I'm going to rush back to school, pick up my kids, and the routine will start all over again. They will do their homework, they will have their playtime, they will have dinner, they will have their bath, they will get into pajamas, and they will go to sleep. I'll have a few hours with my spouse. I'll go to sleep, and oh my God, tomorrow I step on the treadmill all over again, and I do it again. I'm exhausted, I'm depleted, and I wonder why. Why am I doing this? I'm raising my children because that's what we do. We raise children so that they can do what? The greatest hope and dream we have for our children is that they will find someone they will love and they will build a family unit so they can do what? So they can go as crazy as we've just gone and raise their children. So that what? So that their children can raise other children. So we stop at one point and we say, to what end? What is it all for? What is it all about? In our society, we've been trained that for the first 20 or 25 or maybe 30 years of our life, we're on a trajectory towards success, a path towards establishing a career. And that includes getting good grades and graduating from from elementary school and into middle school or high school and getting into the right university. And if you're going to go on for a graduate degree or medical or law school, finally get your degree and have an interview with some of the best places or firms, establish your career or set up your business, and now you belong. You finally reach that milestone and you look at yourself and you say, so now what? I worked my bottom off for 25 years. And what have I achieved? The right to work every single day from morning to evening? What was the purpose? What did I accomplish? So you're told, no, it's not about working. It's about being able to provide. You'll buy a house, you'll have a home, you'll provide for your family. So when do you have this time for yourself? You have it, say, from 5 p.m. until you go to sleep at 9 p.m. So you get 4 hours a day for yourself, while the rest of the day you're enslaved to other people, your clients, your patients, your boss, your customers. So you remind yourself, oh, no, it's not just 4 hours a day. Every week I take 2 days off at the weekend. I have Shabbos and Sunday. So now I ask you, 4 days a week of working hard, 5 days a week of working hard, and just for 2 days to enjoy? Does that seem to work out? I mean, the equation seems a little bit off. I'm working too much and getting too little back in return. So I remember, oh yes, but I also go for 4 weeks of vacation every year. Fair enough. I work for 48 weeks a year just so that I can go for 4 weeks of vacation. So are my 48 weeks actually worthwhile if I take the 4 weeks of vacation? What if it turns out that 1 year I can't take the vacation? Did my 48 weeks end up being without purpose? What is the purpose? There's got to be something greater than this. If it's just to live, and just so that we can have children so that they will live, and just so that they can have children so that they would live, then what for? What is it all about? If it's just about enjoying and having fun, let's face it, we're paying way too much to have way too little fun. We're working way too hard to have way too little fun. So what's the real purpose in all of this? Where are we headed? Some people say it's to leave a legacy behind. And what is your legacy? Well, Beethoven's legacy was a legacy of music, and Van Gogh had a legacy of art. And there was Einstein or Galileo with the legacy of science, and people will remember that. But then again, what have they accomplished? They have made our ability to live a little richer. They have broadened our ability to live. Edison has left a legacy of discovery. And what has he discovered? Tools that help us live a little more conveniently, with a little more pleasure. But it all comes back to our ability to live. And the question is why? What for? You see, if we're living a circle, then the circle must have an epicenter. And that focal point must be greater than the circle itself. When you draw a circle, you start with a focal point and then you draw the circle around that focal point. The focal point must be there before the circle. If the purpose is in the circle itself, then the circle has no purpose. The circle must begin with a focal point that is greater than it. What is this purpose? Now, back in 1976, David Frost, a British journalist, famously interviewed Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon had really reached the highest achievement available to humanity in today's day and age. He became the leader of the free world, and then had to leave that position in disgrace and indignity. And Nixon said something that I want to quote to you. I have it here in my book, but it's actually available on YouTube. The entire video, or at least excerpts of it, is available on YouTube. And Nixon said to him like this. Nixon said, here it is. To me, Nixon in his very plodding undertones, to me, the unhappiest people of the world are those in the international watering places like the south coast of France, Newport, Palm Springs, Palm Beach, going to parties every night, playing golf every afternoon, then bridge, drinking too much, talking too much, thinking too little, retired, no purpose. And while I know that there are those who disagree with this and think, gee, if I could just be a millionaire, that would be the most wonderful thing. If I could just not have to work every day, if I could just be out fishing or hunting or playing golf or traveling, that would be the most wonderful life in the world. They don't know life, because what makes life mean something is purpose, a goal, the battle, the struggle, even if you don't win it. Purpose. There must be a purpose if life is to have any meaning. And that purpose must be greater than just the ability to live. In 2005, during the Katrina storms, most people fled New Orleans, but some people made their way into New Orleans. And those were the volunteers who went to help others who were in need. When George W. Bush spoke about these people, he said, while people were fleeing, Chabad sent volunteers in, because these volunteers were serving a purpose that is greater than life. If the purpose of life was just to live, then why would I risk my life to enable someone else to live? The equation wouldn't work. Put my life at risk so that another person can live, unless helping another is a purpose that is greater than life itself. So where do we begin when we look to define a purpose? I would suggest to you that we start at the top. We look to the people who we think live most purposeful lives, and then we try and measure ourselves up to that and see how close we can get. And the truth of the matter is that for us in the Jewish world, a tzaddik, a person who lives to a very righteous standard, that would be the person to whom we would look for purpose. Now, to us, one of the greatest tzaddikim in the history of Judaism was King David, David HaMelech. David HaMelech was a great warrior. He was also a great poet, and he was a great servant of God. Yes, he had had his weak moments, but he came roaring back from them, having had to perform teshuvah and became more righteous than anybody else on the face of the earth. And David HaMelech writes something fascinating in the book of Psalms. He says, Nar Hayiti, I was once young, Gam Zakanti, I've grown old, Velo Ra'iti, I've never seen, Tzaddik Ne'ezav, an abandoned tzaddik, and a righteous person who was abandoned. I've never seen a righteous person who was abandoned by God. V'zaro mevakesh lachem, whose children have to seek bread, have to collect charity. I've never seen a righteous person whose children have to seek charity. Now I ask you, was King David living in some kind of idyllic wish dreamland? Or was King David living in the real world? Because in the real world, there are lots of righteous people whose children have to seek bread. And yes, they really do seem abandoned by God. They live difficult lives, harsh lives, and I don't know what King David was talking about. He did not need look further than his own history. He himself went through years of difficulties and challenge and persecution, where he evenly calls out to God, Keli, Keli, my God, lama azaftani, why have you abandoned me? And here he says, I've never seen a tzaddik who was abandoned. What was he talking about? Well, let me tell you a story. You may or may not have heard it from some of your rabbis. It's a story that is often retold in the annals of Chabad. It is about Rabbi Dovid, the Maggid of Mizrich, who sent two of his students to find out the meaning of happiness. He sent them to one of his other students, Reb Zusha of Anapoli. They travel to Anapoli, they knock on the door. Reb Zusha opens the door and says, how can I help? And they say, the Rebbe sent us to you so you can teach us what it means to be happy despite suffering. Rebbe Zusha welcomes them into his home. They come into a hovel. Literally, it was a small little wooden shack. There were leaking roofs. The table doubled as a bed at the nighttime. It was a horrible, impoverished existence. And he looks at them and he says, say again, what did the Rebbe ask you to learn from me? And they said, the Rebbe wanted you to teach us how to be happy despite suffering. And Zusha says to them, I don't understand why the Rebbe sent you to me. You see, I've never suffered a single day in my life. Now I ask you, has Zusha not suffered when he lived such a life of impoverishment, of poverty? How can it be that Zusha doesn't consider this suffering when most of us would? A tzaddik seems to have another barometer by which he or she measures success. And King David must have had one like that as well. So what were they talking about? How did they measure good? And here we come to the subtitle of today's talk. They found the God in good. To them, when they spoke of good, they meant God. You see, in the very same book of Psalms, King David wrote, Ta'amu ura'u, taste it and you will see. What will you see? Ki tov Hashem, God is good. Zusha says, if God is with me, then am I lacking for anything? Let me tell you a story about a Rosh Yeshiva back in Europe before the war, Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. He had a friend who was a very successful doctor. They had both been in the yeshiva together, but they went different paths when they graduated. Rabbi Elchanan continued to study Torah and became the great Rosh Yeshiva, the dean of the great academy, while his friend went to medical school and became a successful doctor. When the friend visits Rabbi Elchanan, he sees Rabbi Elchanan is living in a very, very poor home. But yet Rabbi Elchanan is well known throughout the world as the great scholar of Torah. And he's living in such impoverished conditions. So he says to his friend, you know, Elchanan, he says, you've always been smarter than me. And it's a shame that you chose the path of Torah, because I was so successful with medicine and I live in a palatial home and all the comforts and luxuries are available to me. If you had devoted yourself to my path, you would have been even more successful than I. You would have had all the trappings of wealth and success. Your name would have been known throughout the world. And Rabbi Elchanan said nothing in response. However, a few days later, it was time for his friend to go home, and they go together to the train station. Rabbi Elchanan does what is the ancient Jewish tradition. You accompany your guest on their way out the door. He takes them to the train station. They're standing there and they're waiting for the train. And as they're waiting, they see another train on another track. And that train is waiting for its departure time. And that train is a beautiful new spanking train with wonderful plush cushions on the seat. And it looks very comfortable. Finally, the guest's train arrives, and it's an old rickety train with these wooden cracked benches. And the guest is about to board his train. And Rabbi Elchanan says, I don't understand. Why would you bother boarding this old rickety train when you've got this very comfortable plush train right behind you? Go there. The man looks at his friend. He says, what happened to you? Did you drink some kind of Kool-Aid I don't know about? That train is comfortable, but it's not heading to my destination. Rabbi Elchanan smiles and says, now I can answer the question you asked me a few days ago. Yes, I could have taken medical school and I could have gone on to the path you took. I would have had a very comfortable life, but it wouldn't have taken me to my destination. King David wrote, a young lioness could be hungry and starve, but those who seek God lack for nothing good. Because if they have God, then what are they lacking? Try this. Close your eyes and imagine that you are working as a clerk for a perfectionist. The absolutely worst kind of existence is to work for a perfectionist, because you'll never be perfect. Unlike God, you can't be perfect. And a perfectionist wants you to be perfect. And one of the things this perfectionist, your boss, wants from you is to bring coffee every day. But you better remember the saucer. Because if you place the coffee mug right down on the table, you'll make a coffee ring on his polished mahogany desk, and that drives your perfectionist boss crazy. One day, you walk in, you're a little bit late, you're rushed, you forget the saucer, you bring the mug and you place it down on the table. The boss looks down, you can see the veins begin to throb in the side of his face turns purple, you know the outburst is coming, but saved by the bell. The phone rings. The boss picks up the phone. It's his daughter. And she tells him the good news. Daddy, Mazel Tov, I'm engaged. He proposed to me. Finally, I accepted. We're going to get married. The boss is so excited. He puts the phone down. He grabs you and starts dancing with you in his office. And you're thinking, what about the coffee ring? Did it go away? No, it's still there. Why is he so happy? Well, who in the world worries about a coffee ring when my daughter is about to get married? Who cares? It's just the coffee ring, right? It's suddenly all put in perspective. I have what's really important. Do I worry at all about what's absolutely of no significance? It's when we come in touch with something really meaningful that everything else fades. All the values we thought were important enough to dedicate our life to suddenly is revealed to be very empty because we have something real. How do you define a tzaddik? A tzaddik is one who has tasted the beauty of godliness, of having a relationship with God, of having God in my life, and has been able to recognize how beautiful it is to the extent that nothing else matters. I mean, Zusha knows that he has a very poor home. He knows that he doesn't have a lot of money. He's been to wealthy palatial homes before. But you know what? It doesn't matter. He has God. He has God with him. He has the privilege of serving God, of chatting with God every morning when he puts on his tallis and his tefillin. He prays to God. He studies God's own thoughts. God reveals his ideas to him through the Torah. Zusha is ecstatic. Zusha has all that he needs. And you're going to ask him to be upset, to consider his existence one of torturous suffering because he's lacking a plush couch? No, that wouldn't happen. Let me tell you a story I heard from Rabbi Manis Friedman. It's a fabulous story. I heard it more than 25 years ago. The story goes like this. Rabbi Manis Friedman says there was a chassid who came to his Rebbe's court. And when he got there, he saw 2 lines for soup. He asked, why are there 2 lines? So the chassid said, the fellow who he asked told him, one is good soup and one is not such good soup. He says, why is there 2 good soups and not good soup? He says, well, the regulars, they get the regular soup, but the visitors, the guests, they get the good soup. So this visitor, he gets on the line for the regular soup. So the chassid who was talking to him taps him on the shoulder and says, excuse me, sir, you're a visitor. Why don't you go in the line of the good soup? He says to him, let me ask you a question. For a good bowl of soup, I should give up my status as a regular by our Rebbe. Let's put it in perspective. I can either be a regular in my Rebbe's home or I can have a good bowl of soup. What's more important? When we look at life the way a tzaddik sees life, all the other trappings become unimportant, insignificant. What becomes most important is our relationship with God. And when we have that, we're stable, we're good, we're happy. And that becomes the purpose that is greater than life. You see, when King David said he's never seen a tzaddik who was abandoned, what he meant to say, he never saw a tzaddik whose children must ask strangers for bread. And because of that, this tzaddik felt that God had abandoned him. No, because a tzaddik is one who never measures success by his economic prosperity. He never measures success by his social standing. A tzaddik measures success by the extent of his relationship with God. So let's bring that home. I said earlier that if we're going to measure the purpose of life, we're going to have to try and measure up to the highest standard. And I described that standard for us. But you and I know that very few of us can live up to that kind of standard. For us, that plush couch really is important because after a while, it does start to hurt. So the question is, how can knowing what a tzaddik is like help me in my life? Well, let me tell you that you don't need to be a tzaddik in order to realign your priorities, your purpose, your goal, the way you see life. Let me give you a simple example of that. There is a story about the Rebbitzin who was very ill. She went to the doctor and the doctor told her to eat early in the morning. She came home and she decided that she would eat as early as she can. She would wake up as early as she can. She would pray as fast as she can so she could finish early enough so that she would have her breakfast, as the doctor said, early in the morning. One day, her father-in-law, that was the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, noticed that she was waking up very early, praying very fast so that she can eat as the doctor prescribed early in the morning. And then her father-in-law said to her, listen, don't you see what you're doing? You are praying in order to eat, when it's better to eat in order to pray. It's about flipping the script and shifting perspective. We can't necessarily throw away all of our trappings and say, I don't need that because I have God in my life. But we can introduce God into our lives so that our lives become purposeful the way they are, and that way find stability and an anchor in a world that shifts its values all the time. We can have a stable set of values. How do we do that? When we look at the things we have, we ask ourselves, what are they for? For the most part, I look at my home and I say, my home is for me to be able to enjoy family time and have a wonderful place to raise my children. Oh, and by the way, since I have a home, there's a little spot that I give over, that I devote to God. It's like just about 4 inches on my doorway. It's called a mezuzah. Well, I have a home and God gets a few inches. The way a tzaddik would like for us to think is a little bit different. There is a home so that God can have those few inches for the mezuzah. That's why I have a home. But you know what? God says to me, once you give me the spot I want, I'll let you keep the rest. You could use the rest for yourself. The home is not for you. The home is for me. But once you have it, you can use it. So when we're not in isolation or in lockdown, you can use your home in a way that would make God proud. So that you can have visitors over who maybe need a warm meal to eat. You can have somebody over to sleep over at night because they're visiting and they don't have a place to be. Maybe they came for a simcha and they're staying for Shabbos, and you can open your home to them. You can use your home to host a class after Corona, and you can have wonderful events because you have a home. This is not your home, it's God's home. That's why you have a home. You want to know why you pursued a career? So that you can buy a home, so that you can do what with it? So that God can have a home in Mequon and you can be its custodian. And because you're God's custodian in God's home, yeah, you can sleep there too, rent-free. Yes, you can eat there too. After all, you made the meal. Rent-free, board-free, because you are the custodian of God's home in Mequon. You know what? You make an income. 10% of that by Jewish law goes to charity. How do we think of it? I made 100% and I have to give away 10% for God? Or do we say God wants 10%, so he was kind enough to let me use the other 90? That's how we think about it. Let's talk about prayer, because that was the story with the Tzemach Tzedek and his daughter-in-law, that she ate in order to pray, whether she should be when she prayed in order to eat, when she can eat in order to pray. Let me ask you this. When most of us think about prayer, we think we have a need and we want it fulfilled. And so we pray to God for that need to be fulfilled. How about we flip the script? Maybe God gave us this need so that we would have something to pray about. Do we pray because we have needs, or do we have needs so that we would pray? If we didn't have needs, we might not come to pray to God every day. So he gives us needs every day. It's all directed around God. That's not to say that like a tzaddik, I can live in a hovel and it's just as good as living in a palatial home. Because the tzaddik really does appreciate God to the extent that he doesn't have to worry about the others. For the tzaddik is like that old grandmother who's walking down the shore near the beach, near the ocean with her 2-year-old granddaughter, and a great big storm rises up and the wind tears her granddaughter out of her arms and drops her in the ocean. And the grandmother drops on her knees and prays to God. Sorry, knees, that's a Catholic thing. She prays to God and she says, please, dear God, return my granddaughter to me. And then the wind throws the granddaughter right back into her arms. And she looks at this little girl, and then she looks up to the sky and says, she had a hat. Why is that funny? Because who cares about the hat when you have your granddaughter back, right? How important is that little hat? Who cares about that hat? That's where the tzaddik stands. But the rest of us care about the hat because we don't see life the way the tzaddik does. But we can reorient our life so that we would be more tzaddik-like. And when we do that, life becomes purposeful. Let me tell you a story that really highlights this. This is about a fellow who made a very big investment. All of his life savings were on the line and things were not looking good. He was standing to lose $1 million. So he runs to the synagogue and he opens the doors of the ark, the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark. He's alone in the room and he's praying to God, please God, save my $1 million. He's crying, his prayers are pouring directly from the heart. Suddenly, a little boy shows up near him and is crying just as loud and screaming that he needs $10 to go fix his bike. And this guy can't concentrate. The little kid's voice keeps getting in the way. So he turns around, he pulls out his wallet, he gives the kid $10. He says, okay, you go fix your bike. As soon as the kid is gone, he turns around to the Aron HaKodesh and he says, God, now that I have your undivided attention, can we get back to my $1 million? Now, in his mind, he just gave the kid $10 so that he could save his $1 million, right? But flip the script. Maybe God put his $1 million at risk. So he would be here in this moment when that little boy needed $10. That's what life is about. And therein lies our purpose that is greater than life. So that when some of our expectations are dashed, when some of our desires go unfulfilled, when in a time like this we are disappointed by decisions that our government makes, by the requirements that it places upon us, by the obligations that they place upon us, and that can throw us off. To remind ourselves why we live and what our purpose is. And if our purpose is to find a connection with God, then indeed, no matter what the shifting values of the time might be, we can have an anchor and we can find stability and it can be good because ultimately we live in God's home and God's home is the purpose for our entire life. I will close with a story that Rabbi Shais Taub included in his book, God of Our Understanding. And I actually asked him for permission to adapt the story a little bit and to use it in my book, Mission Possible, in a bit of a different context in which I share it with you. Because in his book, it was used in the context of a recovering alcoholic. And in this context, it's about finding stability. The story is of a person who comes to God and says one day, dear God, I'm looking for fulfillment. So God says, what do you have in your pocket? So the man reaches into his pocket and he finds $5. God says, you're lucky, we're running a special today. I can give you fulfillment for $5. Give me $5, I'll give you fulfillment. So the man says to God, I'm happy to give you $5. I think it's a very good deal. But if I don't have $5, how will I put gas into my car? So God says, aha, you actually have a car too. You failed to mention that. The price for fulfillment just went up. It's $5 and a car. He says, dear God, I'll give you the car and I'll give you the $5. But if I don't have my car, how will I pick up my children from school? Ah, says God, you actually have children. You didn't mention that either. The price for fulfillment went up again. It's $5, it's a car, and it's children. So the man says, dear God, I'd be happy to let you take my children, but my wife, she wouldn't be happy at all. I mean, she'd never be okay with that. And God says, a wife. The price for fulfillment is $5, a car, your children, and your wife. He says, God, you want my wife? By all means, you can have her. But how will I fill my home? It'll be so empty. I have a home that has enough place for my children, my wife, myself. I'll be all alone. I'll be lonely. And God says, you know what? I need your home as well. The man cuts his losses and says, okay, God, you can have my home. And here's my wife and my children and my car and my $5. Can I now have fulfillment? And God says, yes, you can have fulfillment, but I want one more thing. The man says, I gave you everything. I have nothing left. And God says, no, you misunderstand. I want you to take your home back, but it's not your home anymore. Since you've given it to me, it's now my home. So live in it the way I would live in it. Now, I want you to take your wife back, But since you've already given her to me, she's not your wife, she's my wife. Treat her the way I would treat my wife. And your children, take them back too. They aren't your children, they're mine. Raise them as I would raise them. And here's your $5. Or here's your car. It's not your car, it's mine. Drive to the places I would go. And here's your $5. It's not your money, it's mine. Spend it as I would have spent it. My dear friends, if we live like this, then everything in life is good because we found the God in good. There might be fluctuations with lots of little details, but they'll all be the secondary background. The primary focus and purpose will be stable, and we will have found our purpose, which is greater than life. If you found a purpose for which it's worth dying for, such as the volunteers who went into New Orleans during Katrina, then you have found a purpose that is worth living for. Shavua Tov.
Lazer, you got muted. Lazer. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
last 5 seconds.
Unmuted now.
Yeah.
I was just concluding saying that Shavua Tov, thank you for having me, and I look forward to meeting you again in a healthy world, a happy world, a world that is uplifted through the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi Lazer. Beautiful, very uplifting, and the practical message. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this really meaningful and beautiful evening. And I will, while the program is over, I'm not going to close the program. The meeting will stay on. Those who want to sit and talk or say hello to someone else. Otherwise, thank you, everybody. Shavua Tov. May Hashem bless us all with good health, with a meaningful life, happiness, and healthy children and families. Shavua Tov.
Amen.
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 Shabbat Tov.
Amen. Thank
Shabbat
you.
Tov.
Thank you. It was a great program.
Thank you. It was
Shabbat
great.